Hi, I'm Dr. Chris Stevens, and this is the Psychology to Live By podcast. Welcome to Psychology to Live By. This is a podcast with a simple goal: to live life a little better. And joining me on the podcast today is Bill Goodwin. Bill's an author, speaker, leadership coach, and a hope strategist. He's 30 years of leadership experience in growing and building individuals and teams via leadership training, proactive coaching, and speaking for personal growth. He's also a certified speaker and coach on leadership for the John Maxwell leadership team. His new book, Priority Living, is a deeply personal journey of transformation that began on November 23, 1999, when Bill, at just the tender age of 28, died from a severe asthma attack. Fortunately, he was resuscitated, and this near-death experience ignited a profound shift in how he viewed time, purpose, and daily living. So now, 25 years later, he shares a framework he's developed and lived by called Priority Living, a guide to intentional, meaningful living. So this is a book informed by lived experience, not academic study per se. It's very hands-on with reflection questions, small group discussion prompts, and multimedia resources. As such, it's meant to be experienced, not just read. Bill has distilled his thinking into 7 pillars for living according to one's priorities. We'll discuss these, of course, and no doubt the psychological implications of Bill's ideas. But above all, this is a book of honesty and directness. When Bill reached out to me, he thought my audience might find it uplifting and useful. I agreed, and thus I bring you Bill Goodwin. Hello, Bill. How are you? Are you well?
I am well. Chris, it is an honor to be with you. I've been looking forward to us finally meeting, and so thank you for having me. What an honor to be with you today.
No, it's a pleasure. And we've got about a half an hour, Bill, and the main focus of our discussion will be your book. But I'd like to sort of begin. You might just want to give the listeners a very short potted history of your life. We know about the near-death experience, but if you can just fill us in, bring us up to the present moment in terms of who you are, what you do, what you've experienced.
Absolutely. So I currently live in the USA, and I live in the state of Minnesota, which is a beautiful climate. In the summer months, we have over 15,000 lakes in Minnesota. It's absolutely green and beautiful. But the wintertime, not so much. We call it the bold north. It's very cold. And so I live in Minnesota. I'm married for 32 years to my bride, Carla, and 2 adult children. Our daughter is married with 2 grandsons, and our son lives in Nashville and Tennessee. And yeah, just wonderful to be sharing with you a little bit more about my story. I grew up, though, in a warm climate. I grew up in a climate more like Australia, in Arizona, which is the southwest of the USA. And I really, my extended family is there, and I really enjoy the outdoors. I really enjoy exercise, and I enjoy being out on the lakes of Minnesota, as well as just experiencing the fullness of life, however that can play out. And so, yeah, that's a little bit about me. My backstories, just real quick, my backstory was I was in ministry for a number of years as a youth pastor in a church, and then became a senior leader or a lead pastor of a church. And then over the more recent years, almost 5 years, I've been full-time in this leadership lane. However, I've been developing leaders all of those years I was in ministry. So I've really been, for decades, been developing leaders.
Well, that may well come into our conversations, because, as you know, I've spent decades consulting into workplaces and have run leadership programs for a long time. So we'll see. But thank you for that. And also, Probably not that many people know about my background in terms of religious studies and my interests with that and the creative process and and psychology. For me, they're quite a happy triumvirate. But let's start with the book. It's always a good thing to understand what was the drive to write this book. Like, why write this particular book, and why now?
Mm-hmm. Good question for us to start with. I actually was in the process of writing another book that will be coming out in the future. But while I was writing that book, I'm a part of National Speakers Association. We call it NSA. And we had a guest keynote come and be sharing about when you add to the body of work, it takes your speaking to another level. And I was having lunch with a friend that was at that seminar with me afterwards. He is an author himself. And we started talking about, wow, I really want to add value to people with bringing my own contribution to personal development. And I started to tell my friend about what I call these 7 pillars and so on. And he looked at me across the table. You have those moments where you're like, wow, that was a pivotal moment in my life. And my friend Jimmy said, Bill, you need to write this book. This needs to be your first book. Your other book is fine. It's got kind of a focus reader group. This is a much broader focus. Everybody wants to know how to make their life count. And you have a compelling backstory that led you to your quest to make your life count by being given a second chance. And you already have this framework of these 7 pillars. I really think you need to write this book. And it didn't take long for me to realize he was absolutely right. And so I started out on the journey of writing Priority Living. And then along the way, learned that, I'm a part of Maxwell Leadership, and there's Maxwell Publishing. And I learned that there was a publishing program that I could get partnered up with a author coach, and just to guide me from time to time and kind of learn the ropes of being a first-time author. And it all seemed to really come together that I was on the right track to share this message after something that's not theory. I've lived this for over 20 years. It's definitely something that I want to get this message out, because one or more of these pillars, I believe, could really make a difference in someone's life if they can just have the opportunity to learn about them, whether it be reading the book, hopefully, or on a podcast or a keynote that I give. So that's really the backstory and how I really felt like now was the time to share this message with the world.
It's interesting, isn't it? And we might come back to this question of wanting to make a contribution to others, and particularly the idea of a legacy. I know you come to that at the end of the book. But just to say that it's not necessarily intuitively obvious to people why giving to others is so inherently good for oneself as well as for others. And I think that probably in our conversation we will touch on part of our design as human beings is as deeply social animals, and that if we're searching for true happiness, that somewhere along the way we need to discover the true happiness comes from diminishing the ego somewhat and contributing, knowing that we are contributing to others. But I'm leading the witness a little bit here very early on. Let's dive into the book. It's called Priority Living. Can you give us a sense of why that title?
Well, that title is important to me because I believe that in order to really be fulfilled in life and make that contribution that you were just speaking of to others, is we have to assess what's our priorities and be able to establish those priorities in our life so that first and foremost ourselves, we can know when we look back on our life that I was intentional. That's a key word for me, being intentional about the way I lived my life. And we also can get clarity on the direction that we desire to lead our life. Clarity always precedes peace, and I believe clarity always precedes success. So that all comes down to priorities. It's interesting because the word in its original is just the word priority, meaning that there's not plural priorities. You
Yeah.
have multiple priorities. And so for me, I just found that being intentional about the how I'm living my life with priority is a more fulfilling life.
And I guess what sits behind that uh, for ourselves, like you and me as individuals, but perhaps for many people out there listening and not listening, um, is that very often we get sidelined in life. That we end up living a life not run by our priorities. In fact, the person may not even be aware what their priorities are. Is that part of the insights you had here, that the people suffer when they don't live, when either they're not aware of their priorities and or that other people are determining the priorities in their life?
Absolutely. I do believe that. Chris, most people accept their lives, they don't lead their lives.
Mm.
And if we want to live a priority life, then we need to take some ownership of being intentional about the life that we desire to live, and not just whatever happens, happens. Especially if you want to accomplish something, it doesn't necessarily mean health. It doesn't have to mean wealth or success. But if you want to accomplish anything in life that's contributing to society, to the people around us, to our country, to our world, whatever it is, we have to be intentional about that. Nobody ever coasted to success. Nobody ever drifted and woke up one morning and said, "Wow, I just invented something, or I just
Yeah.
created something, or I just became successful." It just doesn't happen that way. It happens by setting your priority and then by being intentional about living a life that is going to be meaningful for you, and hopefully you're making a difference in the lives of others.
It's interesting though, Bill. My contrarian mind was
Hmm.
listening and thinking, yeah, but what about someone who's born into wealth, right? Like
Sure.
that they can coast their way. Now, of course, I'm being a devil's advocate here in that
Yeah,
I've counselled many wealthy people who are desperately unhappy. Um,
that's right.
so wealth on its own really, in some ways, can be a disadvantage in that it distracts people from exactly what you and I are talking about.
Hmm.
Okay, so I think that's pretty clear that there's a kind of insight that intentionality is absolutely crucial to our happiness, and also, as you say, to achieving what we think is important. Um,
Hmm.
and so these seven pillars, and perhaps uh, it might be useful. What do you think? In describing the book, is it best to start just by naming the pillars and then working through them? Do you have a sort of way that you navigate
Yeah,
explaining
there's
the
there's
book to
several ways
people?
we can do it.
Yep.
I could touch on the seven pillars just with a few sentences about each one, and then if you want to take a deeper dive on any particular one,
Yeah.
we could go that route if that sounds okay.
Okay. Let's do that.
Yeah.
These seven pillars, by the way, I'm just assuming that these are like reflections on your life and experience, and then at some point you crystallize these seven things. Is that the way it worked out?
That's right. I didn't set out to write a book. I didn't set
No.
out to have a framework. I really started out to be intentional about the way I live my life in light of
Yeah.
the fact that I've been given a second chance at the age of 28.
Yeah.
So, but over time, then all started to come together and going, wow, I really have a
Yeah.
framework and kind of crystallized it, as you said. So the first pillar is purpose. You start with purpose. In that chapter, there's 10 questions about purpose that help an individual begin to identify their purpose. I love the quote from Mark Twain, who said, "There's the two greatest days in your life
Yeah.
are the day you were born and the day you discover why."
Yeah.
What a powerful statement. And that's all about purpose. And that's where I started. And when I was 28, I began to say, why am I still here? I shouldn't be here anymore. I've been given a second chance. Well, there must be a purpose. And so I began to be on a quest to unpack what is my purpose.
Yeah. and you know, not to get too nerdy, but a thing that distinguishes human beings probably from most other creatures is that we're teleological. You know, it literally means we're caused by the future, and because we have this extraordinary capacity for imagination, we can construct who we want to be, where we want to be, what we want to create, and that can have a causative effect on us in the present. And I think that
I love that.
And I think that's the thing that allows us to I don't know whether it's the right word here, but resist or to not be completely dominated by the forces around us in the present. You know, so we have all the sociological influences on us, which are very massively significant. We have our own genetic endowment, you know, our personality. We have our own upbringings. All of these things are channeling us in you know, collectively into certain directions. Perhaps one of the only things that can allow us to, you know, as we said, navigate with some direction and intentionality is this clarity, as you mentioned, of what it is I want to achieve. What, you know, and it doesn't necessarily have to be absolutely crystal clear, but there's a strong sense of purpose. It's the kind of things. So, for example, Psychology to Live By, in all its humility, really, the purpose is to help people live life each day just a little bit better. You know, so I'm not.
Yes.
And what shape that takes can keep growing and developing, but the abiding purpose stays the same, right? Okay, so we've got purpose. And
yes.
So once a person has some sense of, well, this is what I want to do with my life, or for now, this is my purpose, what's next?
Yeah, well, first of all, I believe that your now leads to your next. So whatever our friend that's listening is doing in their life right now, they might feel like I'm not really living my purpose, but just know this, that your now leads to your next. So you're in process of preparation for the next thing. The next pillar is growth. We want to be people who grow, and it's all about that personal development. It's all about leading our lives, not just accepting our lives. My mentor, John Maxwell, says the only guarantee that tomorrow will be better, Chris, is if we're growing ourselves today. I absolutely love that quote, because what we invest in ourselves in personal development today is going to produce something positive in our life in the future. So whether it's through our mental health, our emotional health, our spiritual life, even our physical health, all of the ways that we're developing ourselves and being intentional, there's that key word again, today is going to pay off in the future for our lives. And I started to learn this at a very young age when I was a teenager from an uncle of mine, my Uncle Tom, who was a business owner. And he would come to visit me. He and my aunt would come and visit our extended family. They lived in a different state in the U.S. And he took me under his wing when I was a teenager and began to introduce me to cassette tapes back then of Zig Ziglar. Yeah, this kind of goes back to Zig Ziglar. And if you're familiar with Og Mandino, his books on the greatest salesman, and just all of these personal development tools and Think and Grow Rich, those types of things. And I began to want to grow myself and start to look towards the bright future and begin to set goals and begin to set a course for my life. And that was really influential because my uncle was such a influential person in my life. And so anyway, the second pillar is all about growth and the importance of being intentional to grow ourselves.
And I wrote down, I think it was from that chapter, a quote from you, I think, and it's a simple one. It says, evaluated experiences are the greatest teachers. And I emphasize there the evaluated part of that sentence, because I think an issue that we all have is we have plenty of experience, but if we don't learn from it, it's just one damn thing after another. But so there's part of the growth thing is this way of reflecting on one's experience and evaluating it. And I think that's that's the critical piece here is, and I note throughout the book, there's lots of little practices. Like I said up front, there's little quizzes, but a lot of the practices are reflective practices, and they're sitting back at the end of the day. What did I do? What could I have done better? And these are fairly standard, by the way, practices in the psychologist toolkit. If you're getting people, often you get them to journal, or they do gratitude practices, and there is something about using this reflexive consciousness to be able to take oneself as an object in the world and apply that reasoning to it, right, and separate from our personal attachment to it. So I'm going to use that quote, evaluated experiences are the greatest teachers, because experience alone is not enough, right? It has to be evaluated.
Right. The bookends of success, Chris, are preparation on the front end and evaluation on the back end.
Yeah.
So oftentimes when we're going into a situation, maybe it's planning an event, let's just use that as an example. We do a lot of preparation, but how much time and then if the event doesn't go great, we might evaluate and go, well, how could we have done it better? Yeah. But when the event goes great, we don't really evaluate it. We go, wow, that was great.
Yeah.
And now there's definitely things that we did well that we need to remember. What did we do well? Yeah. What could have we done better? What did we miss? What were opportunities that we would think of for the next time if we do that same event? So in all areas of our life, if we think of the bookends of success as preparation on the front end, evaluation on the back end, even evaluating, like you mentioned, our day, we can at the end of the day, just a quick, what did I learn today? Who did I meet today? What did I do well today? What could I have done better today? We talk about, people talk about, can you get 1% better every day?
Yeah.
With growth, we talk about the fact that we grow older naturally. We don't have to do anything to grow older.
Yes.
But we will not grow better unless we are intentional. And this evaluation piece of the bookends of success is one way to do it.
It's a couple of thoughts there, Bill. The 1% thing is very interesting. I don't know whether you've heard of the law of marginal gains, but it comes from, the fellow's name escapes me at the moment, but he was the coach for the British cycling team that took them from being the laughing stock of the international cycling to gold medalists. And the idea was just this simple thing. It's the compound interest of small improvements every day that beats big improvements here and there, right? It's this.
That's right.
And in the therapeutic room, sorry to cut across you there, but in the therapeutic room, very often people are looking for massive changes. And the job is actually to take their attention to, you said today wasn't as bad as yesterday. What happened today that was different? What did you do that was different? And once people get their hands on, oh, well, I bit my tongue, I didn't say what was on my mind, or I, I remembered to ask them, what they wanted, just very, very small things. And I say, well, do that some more, and then eventually what you're inculcating in them is this reflexive habit, this observational stance to self. And so then a person can start designing their way forward empirically, like they're observing, actually that worked. And I remember Howard Gardner, not Howard Gardner, it was a guy who wrote with the Dalai Lama the book, The Art of Happiness. He was, but I remember he asked the Dalai Lama, he said something along the lines of, basically, what's the purpose of life? And the Dalai Lama laughed, which is always part A of his answers. I don't know if you noticed that. And he said the purpose of life is to be happy. And Howard Cutler, his name was, and Cutler paused and then said, "Your Holiness, how do you do that?" and of course the Dalai Lama laughed, part A of his answer, and part B was he said something very disarmingly simple. He said, you notice what makes you happier and you do more of it. And you notice what makes you unhappier and you do less of it. And, I thought that's a non-trivial answer. It's not easy to do that. But I think that when we're talking about growth, that's the secret. It comes with this prior intention to grow, but then the methodology is this honest, as you say, preparation and then, the pre and post-mortem,
Yes.
Okay, so I cut across you at some point there.
I'm sorry, Chris. I just wanted to comment that story that you were sharing about the cycling team. I do remember reading that in James Clear's book, Atomic Habits.
That's right.
And he really lays that out, and that was such a powerful story when I read that. So thanks for bringing that up. I'm glad you reminded me of that wonderful example.
Yeah. So then I think the next pillar was impact. Is that right?
That's right.
Yeah.
The next pillar is impact. So once we discover our purpose and we are growing ourselves, now we're in a position to, how do I make an impact? How do I make a difference in this world? How do I make a difference in someone's life? So to me, impact could be it doesn't necessarily have to be some global impact of change, but I write in the book, it could be changing a baby's diaper in the middle of the night. It's like you just made an impact for that child that needed a change. So there is, I guess, levels, if you will, to how we can make an impact or ways in which we can make an impact. And I think it's important to look at examples, not only of maybe well-known people, but also not as well-known people that are in our lives that you're like, how are they making an impact? They are making a difference in their sphere and in their world. And so that's really what we get into in that third pillar, in that third chapter, is really how do we go ahead and move forward in making an impact.
I really like that, Bill, especially the idea that impact doesn't have to be this world-shaking, world-changing, massive thing, right? There's a bloke who lives up the road. Oh, bloke is a man in Australia.
Yes.
He's what we call a chippy. He's a carpenter, and is one of my good friends, and uneducated, but he's very smart, and but he's got this quality about him. Like, I always feel, just better every time I've spent any time with him, any sort of presence, and he's completely irascible and irreverent and cheeky and politically incorrect, but he's got a great heart, and I just think he contributes. He has a lot more impact on the world than a lot of what I would call smart asses of the world who've got big egos and who are well-to-do, but actually don't do any good for people, right? So I really appreciate that idea that people don't have to think like they've got to transform everything in their life. They can start with their spouse or their kids or their friends or their neighbour, or, they can start with every day.
That's right.
Having that impact. And I think you mentioned in that chapter things like being kind and helpful and listening and encouraging people as the kind of... So what I was going to ask you about was, and again, I don't want to lead the witness, but for you, when you're thinking about impact, it seemed to me anyway that you're largely talking about impact on other people. Is that right?
That's correct. That impact for me is making the difference for other people or in other people.
Yes.
I love the example you gave of your neighbor that, I say in the book, do small things and create big waves. So for me, I'm looking for even the simplest things that might be overlooked, like holding the door for someone, smiling, greeting someone, that all of those types of things are ways that we can make an impact and make a difference in someone else's life, in our communities, by being mindful of, how can I be... I say it this way based on my faith. I say, that we're to be salt and we're to be light, and salt makes things better and light makes things brighter. And, those are ways that we're making an impact, and it might not be earth shattering or world changing, but it does change that person's world for that moment.
It does, doesn't it? And a couple of thoughts that spring to mind. One is, of course, we need this so much in the world at the moment. There's so much incivility because one thing I think partly we're talking about civility here. But I have an example for you. We have this amazing lime tree on my property. It produces way more limes than we can ever consume. It produces them all year round. And so when I have surplus, I just put them out on the verge at the near the sidewalk, and say free limes, and people take them. And I was out in the garden one day, and this young woman picked up the limes, and she saw me in the garden. And she waved, and she just gave me like this sort of beatific smile, like it was like, and she said, "Thank you so much," right? And because most people, they're a bit shy, they pick up the lime and they scurry away. But it just made my day. In fact, I'm still talking about it. Like you say, these small things make big waves, and we don't know the implications of this. The other piece is, there's research on compassion, right? So and it looks at our bodies, our heart rates, our blood pressure, our endocrine systems. It also looks at our thinking, and obviously, when we're kind to someone else, it's good for them. It lowers their blood pressure, their heart rate. It softens their musculature. Their thinking becomes more creative, more open. They're more apt to problem solve, and they feel more connected. So it's a wonderful thing for the recipient. Turns out, though, the same raft of benefits accrues to the giver. That it's an enlightened self-interest to show kindness and compassion to others, right? And it can be empirically measured. It's like, and it's
I love it.
It's an extraordinary thing. This is, and you can see why I get passionate about this, because here's a psychological finding that's rock solid, that's grounded in empirical data and scientific measurement. And it's like saying to you, well, if you want to be happier, be kind to people rather than try to get more, right?
Right. I love that. That's a powerful study, and I absolutely agree with that.
Now, this next chapter on rhythm I found particularly interesting. So do you just want to take us through that? And I'll try to keep my mouth shut because there's a few things I really want to dig into here.
Oh, I would love for you to just chime in anytime, Chris. I'm really enjoying our conversation. So rhythm is all about the pacing of our life. I feel that so many people are going nowhere fast, or just go, 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 go. And so I believe that direction is more important than speed when it comes to living our lives, and that we are to live life of rhythm. And I learned a powerful example from a gentleman named Mike Breen, who I quote in the book, who says that we are to work from rest, not rest from work.
Yeah.
And in that, he has that he shared with me a pendulum, or a semicircle upside down, where there's a pendulum that swings, and that should be this rhythm of our life. We should start with rest, and then we out of our rest, we're in a good place to be able to work, and from that work, then we swing back to rest. And in there, in between the work and rest, we have growth, and we have play, and we have other things in our life, that our life isn't just made up of working fifth gear, full throttle all the time, but that we are to actually live a life of rhythm, and our life is more fulfilling when we do so. I hit a wall in 2010, complete burnout, and I'm very much a people person. I'm very much a driven self-starter. I didn't want to get out of bed. I had completely worn myself out because I did not have rhythm in my life. I did not have that. I prefer to use the word rhythm than balance, that we are to live a life of rhythm. And so that's made such a difference in my life, especially after my burnout. And I feel like that's something that many people can relate to and can use some encouragement and some coaching into how to live a life of rhythm.
It's so interesting. I mean, as you know, from our brief introductory conversation prior to the podcast, I've worked for a very long time with very high performing people who work too hard, and very often they're either burning out or constantly on the edge of burning out, and they're highly successful, but they're not. But they're. I often say about them, they're like the gold medalists in clutching defeat from the jaws of victory. In that they should be a lot happier, but they're robbed of their happiness because they're so depleted physiologically. And the thing they find the most difficult is actually to rest. So when in fact they get the opportunity to rest, they're not very good at it.
Right.
They can't sit still, and of course, this is exacerbated in the current age by digital devices that you've always got that to reach to get stimulated by. So this I think is a really critical piece for me in reading through the book, that people need to learn to give themselves permission to actually enjoy their life. It sounds weird to say it, that people need permission to do that, but it's my experience that more and more people are just so driven. They're sort of postponing their happiness. They're thinking that when I get this, when I get that, then I'll relax. And of course, when I retire, then I'll go and play all that golf or something, and I'll really enjoy life. But you've got to learn how to enjoy life. And so I think there's that. And then there's this other little thing I wanted to ask you about, and that is, I love the quote, by the way, that the famous quote from Abraham Lincoln about sharpening the axe. That he's you got to spend, if you want to be efficient, you actually need to rest. And in my coaching, I talk to people about a strategic approach to well-being, that you've got to actually treat yourself like an elite athlete would, and you need to cultivate your capacity for high creative output, right? But I just want to come back to this idea of, and this probably relates to your faith and I think your spirituality, I guess, and that is the problem of rest is, or the difficulty people have in resting. I look through the lens of a thing called equanimity. So equanimity is, it's not just a Buddhist term; it's a more general term, but it's this general radical acceptance of what is. It's a general okayness. It's a trusting and relaxing into, well, this is how everything is, and it's okay. Even when things are shitty, it's okay. You know what I mean? And I think that's it's quite a difficult place for people to occupy. It's in some ways easier to distract themselves and busy themselves with some task to justify their existence, or to try to escape uncomfortable feelings. That's a lot I've just thrown at you. I'm just interested in what you want to run with from that.
Wow, there's so much there. I appreciate you sharing that. For me, the aspect of rhythm also is really outlined through my faith, and as you mentioned, because there are some biblical principles as well that kind of line up with the whole aspect, even that Mike Breen gives, to work from rest rather than rest from work. And that is specifically in the scriptures in Genesis, the beginning of the Bible. It talks about how God created the heavens and the earth. There were 6 days of creation, and then God rested on the seventh day. And I find it fascinating that humankind, Adam and Eve, were created on the 6th day, and then they rested with God on the 7th day before they tended to the garden on what's then would be the first day of the week. So Mike Breen points out the fact that we as human beings often operate our lives as human doings, and we should start with that principle of resting first, then working. So that really, for me at least, resonated with me when I was in that burnout stage, especially of wow, I wasn't taking care of myself in a way that I was having this rhythm in my life, and I needed to make some changes in order to come more into alignment with that way of understanding and thinking of things.
Yeah, it's great. And, brings me back to that first principle about purpose, because
Mhm.
very often with my work with people who are burning out, we have a conversation pretty early about, well, what's all this for? What's the purpose here? And look, to be honest, and again, I'm often leading the witness, but they all end up at the same place, and the same place is that people want to be happy.
Mhm.
And they might define that differently, and that's as they should. But we then say, well, there's quite a gap between that goal and where you are at the moment, and it's that rejigging. It's like, oh, okay, so what's going to help me be happy? Well, one of the things is going to be to be good, to be healthy and comfortable in the body, to rest, to actually
Mhm.
enjoy the miracle of existence before you're gone, right? And
Yes, I like
so
that.
now, I've got to move us on a little bit quicker. We've got explore and connect and give. Can you just
Yes,
run us through those in a little bit faster, perhaps, because I don't want
I
to leave
sure
some
can.
space at the end. Yeah.
Yes. So explore is right what you just alluded to. We need to enjoy our existence while we're here.
Yeah.
There's so many beautiful sights to see, cultures to experience, people to meet, beautiful things that we can have in our life. And if our life is only work, then we're not experiencing some of the joys of life. And I also believe we need to have fun every day. I'm a person that wants to not take life too serious. There are serious matters, of course, but I want to have fun every day. And so that's what the pillar of explore is all about. And then we move to connect, and connect is about relationships. Maya Angelou said, the quality of your
Yeah.
life will be determined by the quality of your relationships. So, as you know, Chris, there's a pyramid in that chapter where we go from being complete strangers to how we move up the pyramid of greater connectivity with others, whether it be personal or professional. And I'm a people person myself. And so I love meeting and connecting with new people. Maybe not everybody's that way, but I know that there's value in the connectivity that we have with other people. And so that pillar is all about how do we do that? How do we grow in connection with others?
So, and I don't know whether you're familiar with the Harvard longitudinal study on life satisfaction. It's the world's longest longitudinal study on
Mm,
in social psychology, and it's one key findings over 90 years of tracking people is the one thing that contributes by far the most to their overall life satisfaction and happiness is the quality of their relationships, right?
yes.
It's such a rock solid standout finding. There's no ambiguity. It's like if you want to
Hmm.
base your life on something, base it on that. All right. And
Hmm.
so, again, these things, they can sound a bit naff, they can sound a bit namby-pamby, but actually they're really core to human
Yes.
happiness. And that probably then leads to the final one, the give. Can you just tell us about that, the seventh
Yeah.
pillar?
Yeah, give or generosity is not just about finances. It's really about the way in which we live our life to add value to others, give back to
Yeah.
society, make an impact again through the way that we are generous. And I again, as far as my faith goes, I believe you cannot outgive God. And so generosity is one of those attributes that if we are intentional, again, intentional about how can we serve others? How can we give to others? How can we be generous? And I share, as you know, Chris, a powerful story when I was given this $110,000
Yeah.
vehicle. That was talk about generous. And then also a time where I was given a coach bus. It's just like on the receiving end of generosity is one thing, but then to be on the giving end of generosity, I'll
Yeah.
quote my mentor, John Maxwell, here that says, success is for yourself, but significance is what you do for others. And
Yes.
that's all about generosity. And then John goes on to say, and once you taste significance, success will no longer satisfy. So generosity is really a key pillar for my life. It might be something that others resonate with or can be encouraging for someone else.
Again, it's one of those things that's a little bit counterintuitive, isn't it? Because our culture is really
Yes.
about hedonism, and the
Hmm.
ancient Greeks distinguished between two types of pleasure, what they called hedonic pleasure, which is, they're not against it, but the taste of a beautiful ice cream or something like that.
Yes.
But eudaimonic pleasure, which is much more aligned with this book, and it's all about meaning and purpose. And that to be balanced, you need both. And the eudaimonic pleasure is much more entwined in our social existence, and it's
Hmm.
about contributing to something larger than self, something outside of self, and feeling
Yes.
that. So, I think that giving one it's nicely placed at the end of the seven pillars, because it sort of brings together, actually, when you
Mm.
boil down a sense of purpose for most people, as your mentor has said, it's about how you make other people feel. It's about the significance of your
Hmm.
actions for other people, which again is curious, because you talked earlier about self development, but actually it's not really about self.
Right.
And that's
Yes.
the curious thing. And if we had another conversation, I'd bore you with my distinction between improving and unimproving. And I'm a great advocate of unimproving, but that's a whole other.
Oh, we need to have that conversation sometime, Chris. I'd love
That
to. I'm
yeah,
fascinated by that.
yeah, because I think that people get caught, their ego gets caught in trying to grow their ego, and that's the
Hmm.
problem.
Yes.
Now, to finish though, I want to ask you about this question of legacy.
Hmm.
And there's a sense in which psychology to live by will be my continuing uh, idea of legacy. So I've got a kind of view about what legacy is, but I'm interested in your view.
Hmm. Well, I say in the book that inheritance is what we leave to others,
Yeah,
where legacy is what we leave in others.
yeah, I love that.
So I'm just really mindful that even while I'm on this earth, I want to be thinking about what do I want to be remembered for.
Yeah,
My friend and author Jeff Henderson wrote a book on called "What Do You Want to Be Known For," and he asked that question: "What do you want to be known for?"
yeah,
And if you were to ask others, "What are you known for?" those answers may not be the
yeah,
same. And so
yeah,
there's a gap there. So then the rest of your life work towards shoring up those two questions to give the same answer. And so we want to start with the end in mind. And that's what we do a lot with coaching. Is like, where are you headed? And how can I coach you through questions to help you discover how to get there? So if we
yeah,
don't think about a legacy, if we don't think about what we leave in others and what we want to be known for, then I think we're kind of missing out on an opportunity to continue to make a difference in the lives of others, even after we're no longer here. I wanted to pull this up from the book because I like sharing this part right here. Let's see here. I got it right here. So when my life is over, I want to leave a legacy of positivity and hope. My greatest desire is that I will inspire others by priority living that I have done to make this world better for the time I was here. I don't want to take up time and space without leaving my mark. And
mm,
I think that most people would resonate with those words because that's really a desire for all of us is that we want to leave our mark. And therefore the subtitle, make your life count. It's not
mm.
about me, it's about how can I make a difference in the lives of others. And then I wanted to just share one other part from the book on legacy because I love this so much. I'll find the right page here where I talk about, um, here it is. Um, This is where I talk about page 154 of the book. You see, leaving an inheritance is what you leave to others, where leaving a legacy is what you leave in them. Mm. I'm just thinking about the people who have gone before me and they've left something in me.
I was going to say it's. I think it's a mark of psychological maturity. Like, for much of our lives, I think we're driven by the question of whether we're good enough, whether we can achieve stuff, whether we can make it, whether we're, and unfortunately, I think many people never transcend that, and their life, to the end, is still about demonstrating that they're good enough, or But what you're talking about is a different thing. It's sort of like, no, it's not about me anymore. It's actually about if one can learn to enjoy life and hopefully, I think this is a stage of life thing, find some practical ways like you have to pass on to future generations, to other people. So maybe they suffer a little less than they need, that they can take a few ideas and they can live a little better each day, or they can avoid some pitfalls. You and I have been mentored by people. We've obviously read things that make a difference. And I think that's that for me is the key to our conversation today and to the book. And I think our listeners would have taken a lot from this conversation, as I think we both have. So I just wanted to thank you firstly for reaching out and for obviously writing the book, and thank you so much for your candor and you're a straight up and down bloke, as we'd say here. Like no BS. It's just
I like that.
This is the way. Old-fashioned Australian would say you're fair dinkum, but we don't really say that much anymore. But thank you so much for coming on, and I wish you well.
Well, thank you, Chris. I want your listeners to know they can get a free chapter of the book if they go to my website, which is, I'll give you two URLs. One is PriorityLivingBook.com. That will take you to my business page, which is PriorityLivingCG.com. That stands for consulting group, PriorityLivingCG.com. Either way, you'll get to see the book there, and you'll be able to just put in some simple information, and you will get a free PDF download of one of the chapters of the book. And so that could be very helpful for someone who wants to explore a little bit more. Is this a book I'd actually want to read? Maybe reading the chapter will help you out there and really add value to you. And I'm also available through LinkedIn and Facebook. Just find me by my name, Bill Goodwin, and but then through the website. And I would love to connect with people that would want to say, I want to make my life count, and how I can add value to you. So, Chris, thank you so much for having me. It's been a real joy, and I've really enjoyed our conversation.
Likewise, Bill. Take care. You've been listening to the Psychology to Live By podcast. If you like the podcast and want to know more, my website is www.drchris.life. There you'll find links to my various social media posts, a newsletter, and lots more. And share the podcast with people you like so they can like it too.